Okay, I'm going to be using my universal gearbox for the TT gear motor. In this case, I'm using the 1:48 gear ratio, which is the most common, easy to find one. This particular case, the motor was the dual shaft one, but I don't need dual shafts, so I cut the shaft off on this side. If you watched my video, and I'll put a link to it down below, of this universal gearbox that I designed for these TT motors, then you'll already know how this is assembled. But basically, drop the motor in, put one screw on this side for that, ran a drill bit. In this case, I'm using 3mm brass rods as my axle. You could use the 1/8 inch if you want to drill things out. Cleared a hole so that axle could run through there. Pressed on my gear, pressed on these cams. I'm making a walking robot, so there's going to be cams for the 2 leg controls. This big piece on the back, as I stated before, is where I was planning on gluing on my battery pack. Could have been a 2AA, which I really like the speed of better, but I put in this 3AA because I'm going to be running some flashing LEDs and I want the extra voltage for that application. Now, in my case, in this build, this is where the legs and leg linkages are going to mount. In fact, the body would slide down onto this piece, so let's just call this the body base. I made a cradle area where this whole device is going to be glued and set in there. And the only reason I'm showing you this now is when I glued this battery pack on last night and just dropped one of the brass rods, which we don't need for this conversation. So let's just push those out so they don't keep falling on us. There we go. When I glued that pack on, I had to make sure I had it raised up high enough, so I had just set this in there when I glued that battery pack on to make sure it was sitting on top that lip. And I'm going to have a part that I'm going to glue onto the front here that needs to sit on top this lip too. So I think what we're going to do at this point is just glue this onto this frame. There's no front or back on this frame design. If you continue to follow this build to see what I'm up to, this will be a build video for it in the end if it works out. I'm putting some weld on number 16, which is the best glue you can buy if you actually want to do a permanent bond with PLA. It only works with PLA. And just line this thing up side to side. Hopefully it won't take too long to set up. Looks like I've got it fairly well centered and lined up. So what I'm up to here is I'm going to put in the other gear drive, the worm gear part, and here's the matching gear. And I've got a cam and another gear that are going to go on there. But before I can put this part in, I have to put in this part, and you'll see why here as we do the build. By the way, the axle length that I used for this was 72 millimeters long, and again, I used a 3mm rod. The axle length for this part that we're going to be working on right now is 44 millimeters, and I actually took it out to the vise and just pressed it together with the vise to press it in nice and tight. If you don't have a vise, maybe you got a wood clamp. If you have a C wood clamp, you could use that to probably press that in. But anyway, we need to put this part on, and this is the back part of the slide that the cam is going to move apart in. After it printed, I actually ran a flat file through here just to make sure to get any high spots or anything rough off of it. And this is going to sit in here like that, but we need to secure that. So now is a good time to put a few drops of the old weld on in various places where hopefully that won't interfere with anything. And again, I'm just going to center that. See, it's sitting up on that lower lip down there, and just kind of get the edges flush, like so. Now that I've got that on, I can now put this part in. See, it had to fit through it. I could have designed it with this part removed, and then this could have been on any time, and this could have still been glued on. But that kind of would leave the top of this hanging because there was nothing for it to contact. I wanted that as secure as possible, so I decided it was easier just to do it this way. You know, could have done it anyway, but it's I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to force this this rod in here. I'm going to give it a try though. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. If in the end this ends up slipping, my idea on any of these parts that are pressed onto those brass rods, whether they're gears or cams or whatever, I'll probably, if they're slipping, I'll pull them apart and just drill a hole into the side of that, put it back together, get it all lined up, then drip some super glue into that hole and hit it with the accelerator and zap it. And that should zap it to the brass rod. Okay, well, let's turn the motor on. You can see I got this battery pack, and I just brought up the positive wire, ran to the switch, took the other part of the positive wire, ran it to the motor, the negative wire, I ran directly to the motor. The direction that this turns in the end is going to be critical because there's a cam, so we don't want it binding up. But I think I've got it going. Yeah, we got it going the right way. So you can see this cam can spin around, and this gear can turn, and the walking cams can move. So far, that's what I'm wanting. Okay, I'm going to let this come on around here. There we go. Let's stop that there. Here's the slide piece that I'm going to trap between this slide back and a slide front that we're going to put on there. But this is the actual piece that's going to move. And again, after it came off the printer, I just hit these with a flat file to make sure there weren't any rough places on it. But the idea is it should sit in there, and that cam, when it comes around, should be able to raise this up and lower it down. We're hoping. So before I glue this on, the front part to seal this all together, and of course again I ran the flat file in there to make sure there weren't any rough edges from the printing or anything. I'm just going to kind of test fit it and hold it to make sure it looks like everything is still free. We want this piece that we just put in there to be able to rise and fall. Here comes the cam, starting to lift it up. And once it's up, should stay there, coming ready, and should drop. Okay, so that's all working the way I want. And I'm thinking, rather than putting this front part on with, well, I guess I was going to say maybe I'll use some of the E6000 goop or something to hold this front part on, but haven't decided. If I use this as very permanent, and if I have to take this apart for any reason, I'm kind of screwed. So I think that's what I'll do. I haven't got it sitting here right now, but this is pretty much the end of this part of the video, if you're following along. But I'm going to take some of the E6000, put a little drip on the sides of this back here and here and here. I'm not going to put it on these parts because I don't want to be able to goosh around and come in and hit this part that slides. I'll put a few little drops in the four corners, and then I'll just put that on and let that sit. And that'll be the end of the gearbox build for this particular project. And from I think the next video we'll put the legs and the feet on it so we can see that part going, and we'll work our way from there.